17 minutes after the judge finished talking, I walked out of the courthouse with the divorce decree still warm in my hand. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hollowed out, like 9 years of my life had been scooped clean and dumped somewhere I'd never find it again. My name is Lyndon Crow. I was 38 years old, and I lived in Wilmington, Delaware. Maris Halstead didn't look back once. She stepped toward the sidewalk like she had a lunch meeting, not a marriage buried upstairs. Her father, Roderick Halstead, stood beside her with that smug real estate grin he used when he thought he'd won. Off to the side was Blaine Caro, polished suit, polished shoes, polished face, standing just close enough to make the message obvious. Roderick threw his voice so people passing by could hear him. Some men just aren't built for high-value women. I stared at him and said nothing. That was his whole game. He loved public cuts because they left no bruise anybody could photograph. Maris didn't stop him. She just adjusted the strap on her purse and kept her eyes on the street. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. My phone buzzed. It was my dad, Gordon Crow. Former bank compliance, retired, allergic to self-pity. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He said, calm as rain, start the recall. Right now, 6 million. That number hit like a bite. 5 years earlier, when Maris's company, Halstead Panels, was drowning, my family wired in $6 million to keep payroll alive and vendors off her throat. Her family called it temporary support. My dad called it controlled capital because he trusted paperwork more than promises. I stepped away from the courthouse steps and called my attorney, Vera Pruitt. Vera sounded like every word had already been notarized. I said, activate the capital recovery clause. She asked, is the divorce final? It's final. Then we move. I opened the e-sign app on my phone, ran the verification, and signed the order standing there in the heat. The agreement was simple in the coldest way possible. If the marriage ended, the investing party could recall the funds within 24 hours, and the bank could review linked accounts. My thumb hit confirm, and the screen flashed, transaction initiated. That was when Maris finally turned her head. Not worried, not hurt, annoyed, like I was a loose end she thought she'd already cut. Blaine gave me a tight little smile. Roderick's grin shrank by half an inch. I walked to my car with the decree in one hand and $6 million in motion on my phone, unlocked the door, and got behind the wheel. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield, and the first place my mind went was back 9 years, to the night I met Maris. It was one of those small downtown industry mixers in a hotel conference room that smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner, with cheap name tags, weak lighting, and too many people pretending bad coffee tasted fine. Maris didn't blend into any room. She moved fast, talked faster, and looked people straight in the eye like she already knew where she was going and expected the rest of us to catch up. I liked that right away. I also liked that when she spoke to me, she didn't glance over my shoulder hunting for someone more useful. Back then, I wasn't flashy, and I didn't try to be. I did turnaround consulting, which meant I walked into struggling businesses, found the bleeding, and helped stop it before everybody drowned. My dad, Gordon, taught me the unglamorous stuff early. Read every clause, check every signature, and never trust charm over paper. At the time, I thought he saw danger everywhere because that was how his brain worked. I didn't understand yet that he saw patterns faster than most people. Maris had baggage, but in the beginning, it looked like ambition. She worked late, talked big, and carried herself like pressure made her stronger. I respected that. 4 years into the marriage, though, her company hit a wall hard enough to shake the furniture. Supplier disputes, delayed projects, a tightening credit line, vendors breathing down her neck, and payroll close enough to disaster that everybody could smell it. The result was simple. Money was drying up, and panic was moving in. I remember the night she told me she might lose everything. She paced our kitchen in bare feet, one hand wrapped around her phone, the other dragging through her hair. She didn't cry once. She just kept saying, I cannot look like a failure. I will not be that person. That word mattered more to her than the actual loss. I told myself we were a team, and I meant it enough to step closer and tell her, then we fix it before it buries you. That was when Roderick started showing up more. He always said he was there to help, but he came into our home like he was inspecting a property he might buy cheap. He'd look around the living room, make comments about what needed improving, then throw little digs my way about me doing numbers, while Maris built something real. I swallowed more of that garbage than I should have, because I was trying to keep the house calm. My dad saw through it fast. He sat at my kitchen table one night and asked, how's the company structured, who signs, and what happens if you two split? I got irritated and snapped that we weren't splitting. He didn't argue with me. He just folded his hands and said, then you won't mind protecting yourself. When Maris finally asked for help, it wasn't from her family. It was from mine. I pushed for it because I believed in her and because I refused to stand there watching her company choke to death. Gordon agreed, but only on hard terms. No gifts, he said. capital with enforceable terms. Vera Pruitt drafted the agreement with recall rights, audit authority, penalties, and a control clause my dad insisted on. I thought it was cold. He looked at me and said, "Cold keeps you clear." The day the wire landed, the Halsteads treated me like royalty for about 5 minutes. Roderick called me son in front of other people. Maris grabbed me, kissed my cheek, and said, "We're safe now." Nobody thanked my father. Nobody respected the risk. They thanked the money, and I sat there in my car remembering that while my phone stayed dark in my hand. I kept staring at my phone, but my mind didn't stay in the car. It went straight to when things started shifting. Slow at first, then obvious enough that I couldn't pretend anymore. Once Halstead panels had steady cash again, Maris changed in a way that wasn't loud, but it was constant. Dinner got quieter. She stayed on her phone longer, thumbs moving while I sat there waiting for a sentence that never came. When I asked what was going on, she didn't argue. She just said, "I'm protecting my focus right now," like being married was something that got in the way of her schedule. She started showing up everywhere that mattered to her image. Developer dinners, showroom launches, charity events tied to design leadership. At first, she wanted me there, introducing me like I was part of the foundation. Then I noticed I was just standing nearby while she worked the room. After that, she started cutting me out completely. One night while she was getting ready, I asked if I should come, and she said, without even looking at me, "You don't have to come. It's not really your world." Roderick fed that shift every chance he got. At family gatherings, he made sure the seating told a story before anyone even spoke. Maris ended up next to people he wanted her seen with, and I got parked near the kitchen or at the edge of conversations that didn't matter. When I called it out once, he laughed like I'd told a joke and said, "You're reading too much into it. Don't be so sensitive." Maris didn't correct him. She just kept talking to someone else like I hadn't said anything. Then Blaine showed up. Not all at once. More like a trend that kept appearing until it was permanent. Maris brought him in to reposition the company, which turned into polished photos, influencer deals, and invoices that didn't make sense when you looked at them twice. He was younger, smooth, always dressed like he belonged in whatever room he walked into, and somehow always close to her without making it obvious. I saw him clearly for the first time at a launch event for a new acoustic panel line. Maris stood on stage under bright lights, talking about luxury quiet like she'd invented the idea. Blaine stood just off stage, watching her with this focused look, nodding like he was directing the whole thing. When she finished and the room clapped, she stepped down and looked straight at him first. Not me, him. Later that night back home, I didn't dance around it. I asked, "Is he just a contractor, or is there something else going on?" She didn't even hesitate. "He's an asset to the company." That's what matters. That word stuck in my head longer than anything else she said. Asset. Clean, cold, and replaceable. It told me exactly where I stood without her having to spell it out. A couple weeks later, I got a message from Talia Griggs, the condo community manager. She's not the type to stir anything up, which is why I paid attention when she did. She wrote, "Careful and awkward. I didn't know if you'd want to hear this, but there's been a man coming and going from your old unit." Mostly late at night. I read that message twice and didn't respond right away. I didn't confront Maris either. I stayed quiet, telling myself it would pass if I didn't push it. That was me still playing the role she needed, stable, quiet, convenient. The morning of court, Leah Mott sent me a message that cut through all of it. She said she felt guilty and that she'd seen paperwork moving equity to an outside contractor. She didn't write Blaine's name, but she didn't have to. I knew exactly who she meant. In the courthouse hallway, I saw Owen Calder running between doors, phone pressed to his ear, talking fast like everything was on fire. When he noticed me, his face tightened, and he turned away like he wished I wasn't there. Inside that courtroom, when Maris slid the divorce papers across the table, she did it like she was closing a deal. No hesitation, no emotion, just clean execution. I looked at her, then at the paper, and I understood something I should have seen months earlier. I picked up the pen and signed my name in one steady motion. I put the pen down and pushed the paper back across the table, and that night I barely slept. Maybe 2 hours total, broken and useless. Not because I wanted her back, but because my brain kept replaying every moment I ignored like it was building a case against me. My dad's voice kept cutting through it, steady and blunt. People show you who they are. Believe what they keep doing. I used to think that sounded cold. That night, it sounded like a warning I should have taken seriously years earlier. Early that morning, my phone rang while I was standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing. It was Talia. Her voice came through tight, like she didn't want to be involved, but couldn't stay quiet either. She said, "I thought you should know there's a moving crew at your old unit, and Blaine is here directing them like he owns the place." She paused, then added, "I'm sorry, I didn't want to keep this from you." I told her I understood, and ended the call before she had to say anything else. I drove to court with that sitting in my chest, not sharp, just heavy. Like something had already been taken, and I was the last one to admit it. In the hallway, Roderick was exactly where you'd expect him, holding attention with a couple older guys who looked like developers or investors. He spoke loud enough for anyone passing by to hear, dropping lines about turning the page and getting Maris away from dead weight. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. Maris stood there beside him, calm, composed, letting him do the talking. That was always her move. She didn't swing first. She let someone else throw the punch so she could stay clean. Watching it happen in real time made something click in my head that I couldn't unsee. Leah's message about equity transfers kept flashing through my thoughts. If she was right, and I knew she was, then this wasn't just about a relationship falling apart. It was a plan. They'd been shifting pieces while I was still acting like a husband, still showing up like loyalty meant something on both sides. I didn't have access to the company's inner workings anymore. Maris had shut that door months earlier, cutting me out of meetings, removing me from anything that mattered. But I still had the investment agreement and the bank controls tied to it. My dad made sure of that. The capital sat in a controlled account with covenants that let the bank step in if certain triggers were hit. He set up notifications years ago, and I used to roll my eyes every time they popped up. After the divorce was finalized, I didn't react right away. I waited until I was outside, away from the noise, away from anyone who could spin it into something emotional. I didn't want it to look like anger. I wanted it to look like enforcement. Vera called it execution, and that's exactly what it was. After I triggered the recall, I drove to a small coffee place near the riverfront. Nothing special, just quiet enough that nobody cared who you were. I took a seat with my back to the wall, set my phone on the table, and watched the status screen while I drank something I couldn't even taste. I sent Maris one message. I'm not taking anything that's yours. I'm calling my family's capital. Then I turned my phone face down and left it there. A little later, I listened to a voicemail from Kira Wen at the bank. Her voice was crisp, professional, and remote. She said the recall had triggered a review hold on multiple linked operations until verification was complete. No emotion, just process. I saved the message, picked up my coffee, and took another slow sip. I kept sitting there in that coffee shop, watching the screen like it might blink and tell me I'd made a mistake, but nothing changed. The update stayed cold and final, and what came next didn't happen in front of me. I wasn't there when things started breaking inside her company. I didn't hear the first raised voices or see the first panic. What I got instead were the aftershocks, one after another, clean and ugly at the same time. The first call came from Kira Wen. Her voice sounded the same as before, even and neutral, like she was reading from a script that didn't care about feelings. She said, "The available operating balance in the primary account is effectively zero until the audit review is cleared. No blame, no hesitation, just fact delivered like weather." About an hour later, my phone lit up with a message from Daphne Sutter. She was head of accounting at Halstead Panels, and not the kind of person who sent risky texts unless something was seriously wrong. The screenshot she sent showed internal system alerts stacked on top of each other, partner payments failing, vendor wires paused, payroll flagged for review. Right under it, she wrote one sentence: "This is going to get ugly today." That was all she gave me. No sides, no emotion, just the truth as she saw it. It read like someone standing on a bridge, watching the structure start to crack and knowing exactly how it ends. Later that day, I got a call from a real estate contact I trust, someone who's dealt with Roderick long enough to recognize his patterns and not respect them. He didn't waste time. He said, "You didn't hear this from me, but your ex's family had a rough showing today." Then he told me about what people were already calling the Villa Day. According to him, Roderick brought Maris and Blaine to a private open house in one of those gated neighborhoods where everything looks staged for a magazine. He was talking big, making comments about a fresh start and a place that fits the next chapter. When it came time to lock it in, they tried to put down a deposit on the spot. The terminal declined the card, not once but twice. Roderick blamed the machine right away, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Blaine stepped in and said it had to be a bank error. Maris didn't stay quiet either. She started pointing fingers, shifting blame like it might fix the problem. Then the call came through confirming the accounts were frozen pending review. I didn't hear that story live. I got it hours later, after it had already spread through the circles Roderick cared about. People like him build their image on control, and nothing hits harder than losing it in public. Not long after that, my phone rang again. I picked up without checking, and I heard Owen Calder's voice, fast and tight, before he realized who he'd called. "We can't wire it. The vendor is threatening to stop deliveries if this doesn't clear today." Then the line went dead. That one mattered. Halstead Panels had a major contract running, high-end acoustic systems for a chain of business centers that were also building out medical spaces. Missing a payment there didn't just slow things down. It set off penalties, supplier holds, and a chain reaction that spread fast. Later, Vera forwarded me the official notice from the bank. It spelled out what Maris never bothered to understand. The recall didn't just pull money. It triggered a deeper audit automatically because that was written into the agreement from the start. By the time the sun went down, my phone rang again. This time it was Maris. She didn't sound hurt. She sounded furious. "What you did is reckless," she said. "You are trying to destroy my company." I didn't match her tone. I kept it flat and simple. "I'm enforcing what you signed." She started to talk over me, but I didn't stay on the line long enough to hear it. I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and drove home without turning the radio on. The silence felt better than anything fake. By the next morning, that silence was gone. My phone started lighting up before I even got out of bed, messages stacking one after another from people I barely talked to. None of it was direct at first. A former vendor contact wrote, "Hey, just checking if you're okay with everything going on." Another message came in from someone I hadn't spoken to in years asking, "Why are you going after Maris like this?" That's when it clicked. This wasn't random. This was a story being pushed, and I knew exactly who was behind it. Leah texted me not long after. She didn't waste time. "Internal chat is full of it," she wrote. "They're calling you unstable, bitter, jealous. They want it simple." I could picture it without seeing it. Angry ex-husband lashes out. Company suffers. Clean narrative, easy to repeat, easy to believe. My dad called me mid-morning. His voice was steady, same as always. "Do not argue in public," he said. "Noise helps liars. Records protect you." Vera backed that up when I looped her in. She said, "Save everything. Do not respond emotionally. Let them talk while we build record." That afternoon, the tone shifted. A message came in from a number I didn't recognize. No name, no context. Just one line, "Stop or you'll regret it." I stared at it for a second, trying to decide if it was stupid or serious. 2 minutes later, another message came through. It was a photo. My back, my front door. Clear enough that whoever took it had been standing a few feet away from me without me noticing. For a second, my stomach dropped hard enough that I had to sit down. I'm not built for this kind of thing. I don't look for fights, and I don't play tough. But panic didn't last long. Something practical took over, the part my dad drilled into me for years. I saved everything. Screenshots, timestamps, message data, all of it organized before I even stood back up. I called Vera and told her exactly what I had. She didn't react the way most people would. No shock, no sympathy, just focus. "Good," she said. "That's evidence. Now we widen the circle." She told me to file a report, document every contact, and not engage with anything directly. Then she gave me one more name. "Call Keaton Marr. He'll see patterns you won't." Keaton picked up on the second ring. When I explained the photo, he didn't jump to conclusions. He said, "Could be them, but don't lock in on that. Could be a creditor. Frozen money makes people act fast." That stuck with me more than anything else he said. 2 days later, Talia called again. She sounded alert this time, not hesitant. She said there'd been a man hanging around the building, asking quiet questions, nothing flashy. She gave me a plate number because that's the kind of person she is. I passed it to Keaton. He ran it through someone he trusted and called me back later that night. "Name ties to a private collections outfit," he said. "Not law enforcement, not street level, just someone who gets paid to recover money." That changed the picture completely. This wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. This was pressure coming from outside, from people who didn't care about reputations or narratives. They cared about getting paid. I stayed away from Maris and Roderick, set up cameras at my place, tightened everything, and routed every move through Vera. If they expected me to panic and get loud, they picked the wrong target. I didn't waste time after that. I pulled together everything I had and sent it to Keaton: bank notices, the investment agreement, vendor emails, and anything Leah could share without putting a target on her back. I was careful with her. I didn't ask her to dig or take anything. I told her straight, "Only tell me what you personally saw and when you saw it." She agreed, and that was enough. Keaton called me the next day. No build-up, no drama. He said, "Lyndon, this looks like asset stripping." He said it like a guy pointing out water damage, not like he was breaking news. That tone mattered more than the words. He walked me through it step by step. There had been a pattern of small transfers repeated over and over, starting about 2 to 3 weeks before the divorce filing. None of the amounts stood out on their own. That was the trick. Small numbers don't set off alarms right away, but when you line them up, they start telling a different story. He said, "It's being broken up, moved through, passed through accounts, then pulled back together somewhere else." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wall while he talked, letting it settle into place. Then he added something that locked it in for me. "The trail keeps looping near accounts tied to Blaine's work. Not directly, but close enough to ask questions. Vendor shells, creative services, payments that don't match normal flow." I thought about a conversation I'd had with Maris months earlier, standing in our kitchen while she scrolled through her phone. I'd asked why branding costs had jumped so high when the product hadn't changed. She didn't even look up. She just smirked and said, You don't understand perception. Sitting there now, that line didn't sound confident. It sounded like cover. Keaton didn't let me drift too far into that. He said, don't write accusations. Don't even hint at them. You don't win with guesses. You win with subpoenas. I repeated that to Vera almost word for word. She didn't hesitate. Good, she said. Then we start building the formal side. Within hours, she was drafting requests, document holds, depositions, bank inquiries. Everything structured, everything clean. Around that same time, Daphne reached out again. Her messages were shorter now, more careful, like she knew the ground was shifting under her feet. She told me the Treasury team was scrambling and that Maris was pushing for payments to go out through alternate paths. Daphne wouldn't give me numbers, and I didn't ask. But she gave me one thing that mattered. She keeps demanding emergency approvals outside normal process, she wrote. That was enough. I called my dad that night and walked him through it. He listened without interrupting, then said, You remember the control protection clause? I did, vaguely. He reminded me what it actually meant. If the recall was triggered, I had a 72-hour window to force a board review of signing authority tied to the invested capital. I sat there for a second, letting that sink in. He'd built that years ago because he never trusted Roderick, even when things looked fine. I called Vera right after. Can we activate the control clause cleanly? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. Then she added, But understand this, Lyndon. Once we do it, she's going to feel it immediately. Good, I said. That's the point. While all of that was moving, Blaine started posting online. Nothing direct, nothing he could be held to. Just vague lines about toxic environments and insecure men. Leah sent me screenshots like clockwork. I didn't respond to any of it. I saved everything and added it to the file. By the end of that week, I wasn't dealing with emotions anymore. I was dealing with a system, and I knew exactly how I was going to hit it next. I left that call with Vera and didn't slow anything down. A day later, the message came in, dressed up exactly how I expected. Not from Roderick directly, but through a mutual contact who suddenly sounded very careful with his words. He said they wanted to sit down and find peace, like that word meant anything in this situation. I didn't need to see Roderick's name on it to know whose idea it was. I called my dad and told him. He gave a short laugh, the kind that doesn't carry any humor. They don't want peace, he said. They want your signature on something they can use later. Vera said almost the same thing when I looped her in. They'll try to reframe everything, she told me. Make the recall look emotional, make you look reckless. Do not give them that. I agreed to the meeting anyway, but I went in the way I was taught. Quiet, prepared, and already thinking 3 steps ahead. Vera didn't sit next to me like backup. She took a table close enough to see and hear without being part of it. Before I walked in, she said, Keep it simple. Let them talk. People reveal more when they think they're winning. I brought one folder. Nothing dramatic. Just the agreement, the audit notice, the messages and photo, and Keaton's summary laid out like a timeline anyone could follow. No heavy language, no legal clutter. Just facts in order. The lounge was exactly what you'd expect. Polished, quiet, expensive without trying too hard. I got there early and took a seat where I could see the entrance. Maris walked in first, dressed sharp, controlled, like nothing in her world had shifted. Blaine followed her, staying just close enough to signal his place. Roderick made his entrance last, taking his time like the room belonged to him. He came straight over and put a hand on my shoulder like we were still on good terms. Lyndon, good to see you, he said, smiling like none of this existed. I didn't return it. Let's get to it. He sat down and went straight for pressure. A man is supposed to protect his family, he said. Right now you're hurting people who depend on that company. He kept pushing that angle, trying to pull me into it emotionally, make it about pride. I didn't move. This is a contract issue, I said. Nothing else. Maris stepped in then, softer tone, controlled voice. We don't need to drag this out, she said. We can agree on a repayment schedule and close this cleanly if you stop the audit. That told me everything. She still thought this was something I could switch off. I looked at her and said, the audit isn't optional. It's already in motion. Blaine leaned forward like he belonged in the conversation. You're taking this too far, he said. At some point you have to move on, instead of obsessing over it. I turned my head toward him and kept my voice level. Your invoices are going to have to explain themselves soon. He blinked like that hit closer than he expected. Then Roderick slid a paper across the table. 1 page, clean, simple language? I read enough to see what it was doing. It framed everything like I'd acted emotionally, disrupted operations, regretted it. A neat little statement they could use anywhere. I didn't touch it. Instead, I leaned back slightly and said, calm and almost tired, I don't want escalation either. I saw it land. Roderick relaxed just enough, like he thought I was about to fold. That's when I asked the only question that mattered. Why were equity units moved before the divorce? The reaction came fast. Maris's eyes sharpened. Blaine's jaw tightened. Roderick shifted like he wanted to cut in before anyone answered. Nobody spoke right away, and that silence told me everything I needed. I stood up, closed my folder, and looked at all three of them. "We're past private deals," I said. "Formal requests are going out. You'll answer under oath." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, keeping my pace steady all the way to the exit. Vera fell in beside me a few steps later. "Good," she said quietly. "They showed exactly what we needed." I nodded once, pushed through the doors, and kept walking. 2 mornings after the hotel, the next real hit didn't come from a call or a message. It arrived as a calendar invite marked urgent, just a time in a conference room. That's how you know things have moved out of personal territory and into corporate damage control. The board meeting wasn't loud or dramatic. It was worse. It was a closed room with stale air, weak cooling, and too many people pretending they weren't sweating through their shirts. Galen Stroud, the governance guy, sat at the head like he'd already decided this was a problem, not a discussion. The bank wasn't clearing anything without answers, and that forced everyone into the same room whether they liked it or not. Miriam Cates ran the legal side like she'd seen every version of this before. She didn't care about Maris's image or Roderick's presence. She focused on exposure, liability, and whether anyone had tried to move money ahead of an obligation. Her tone stayed flat, but every question she asked landed heavy. I joined remotely at first. Vera told me not to step into their building until there was a reason, so I stayed on video, camera on, voice steady, saying only what needed to be said. Later, when it made sense, I showed up in person with Vera beside me. I didn't come in hot. I came in prepared. Daphne spoke when Miriam called on her. Her voice was tight, but she didn't break. "There was unusual pressure on payments," she said. "Request to bypass standard approval steps." She didn't point fingers. She didn't speculate. She just described what happened, and that made it stronger than any accusation. Kira joined through speakerphone. Her voice came through clean and cold. "Recall triggered. Audit authority activated. Irregularities flagged. Operations restricted pending review." She didn't raise her voice or add anything extra. She didn't need to. I watched Maris while that was happening. She sat straight, hands still, but I could see it in her face. She wanted to interrupt, to control the narrative, but this wasn't her stage. This was process, and process doesn't care about confidence. Vera presented Keaton's findings next. No complicated language, no technical fog. Just a timeline. Small transfers, tight timing, pass-through accounts, then consolidation. One of the board members leaned forward and said, "So the money was moving out before the obligation hit?" Vera answered, "That is what the pattern suggests." That was enough. Then something shifted that I didn't expect. Blaine asked for a private conversation with Miriam and Galen. They stepped out with him, and when they came back, the tone had changed. Blaine wasn't sitting back anymore. He leaned forward and said he was willing to cooperate. "I can explain how the campaign spending was structured," he said. "I just don't want to be the one this all gets pinned on." I didn't like him, and I didn't trust him, but I wasn't stupid enough to ignore what that meant. Information is information, no matter where it comes from. Maris snapped the second he finished. "That's not true," she said, her voice sharp and controlled at the same time. "You're trying to shift responsibility." Galen didn't react to the tension. He just looked at Miriam, then back at the table. "We're done debating," he said. "We're moving to action." The decision came fast after that. Temporary suspension of Maris's executive signing authority pending audit results. The control clause my dad built into the agreement gave the board the opening they needed, that narrow window to step in and lock things down. Maris didn't argue again. She just sat there, still and silent, like she was recalculating everything in real time. When the meeting broke, people moved out in small groups, talking low. Maris walked past me without a word. Roderick followed, giving me a look that was supposed to land like a threat, but it didn't carry the same weight anymore. In that room, he wasn't in control. I stepped outside with Vera, the air hitting cooler than it should have felt, and I didn't stop moving as we headed toward the parking lot. I got into my truck and sat there for a minute, hands resting on the wheel, then started the engine and drove home without looking back. The next month didn't come at me all at once. It came in pieces, the way these things always do. Emails, audit summaries, and quiet conversations with people who finally felt safe enough to speak straight. I didn't pretend I saw everything firsthand. I didn't need to. I focused on what could hold up under pressure, what could be backed, what didn't fall apart when someone asked a second question. That was the difference now. No guessing, no emotion, just information that could stand in daylight. The bank expanded the audit, and Kira's updates kept the same tone every time, polite and cold enough to remind everyone this wasn't personal. The deeper they went, the more gaps they found, and every gap came with a new question nobody could dodge. Miriam started moving faster too. Legal departments don't wait around when risk starts stacking up, and you could feel that shift in every response that came through. The recall finished clean. Full amount, interest included, plus legal costs exactly as written in the agreement. My family got the $6 million back with penalties attached, all of it tied to paper Maris once treated like background noise. My dad didn't celebrate. He just looked at me across the table one night and said, "That's why we write it down." That was it. Blaine didn't walk away clean. From what Vera told me, he gave them just enough to protect himself from taking the full hit. It didn't make him innocent. It made him useful. People like him build their lives on perception, and once that cracks, everything else follows. His name started carrying weight in the wrong direction, and in his world, that's enough to close doors. Roderick tried to spin it the only way he knew how. I heard through a realtor contact that he was telling people I went after Maris out of ego, that I couldn't handle her success. But those same people also heard about frozen accounts, board action, and audits digging deeper every week. In those circles, reputation matters, but money matters more, and the numbers didn't support his version. Maris asked to see me one last time. Not in an office or anywhere controlled. She picked a high school stadium, empty bleachers, late in the evening when the place felt hollow. She looked different when I walked up. Not broken, not weak, just tired in a way she couldn't hide. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, her voice steady but thinner than I remembered. I stayed where I was and answered straight. "I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because you and your father treated my family's money like it didn't matter. You wanted me gone and quiet. This is what not quiet looks like." She tried to pull it back to something softer, talking about history, about how hard everything had been. I didn't follow her there. "You made your choices," I said. "Now you deal with what comes with them." I turned before she could answer and walked down the bleachers, each step lighter than the last, and didn't stop until I reached my truck. A week later, my dad sat across from me at my kitchen table, eating like it was any normal night. He looked around once, then back at me. "You finally stopped being convenient," he said. I nodded, set my fork down, and reached for my glass. "Hold up. Can I ask you something personal before you scroll? If you've got the hype button, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people, then please subscribe and hit like. It's one click and it matters a lot. Now tell me in the comments, when someone treats your loyalty like a weakness, do you enforce boundaries fast or keep the peace and pay for it later?